Joss Whedon's original vision for Buffy the Vampire Slayer was 5 seasons long. There's a sense of natural progression from one measly vampire to evil itself being the main villain. However, due to the show's popularity, there are 7 seasons of the show, and the addition of the sister show Angel, Buffy had become something that Whedon had never even imagined it could. It was popular. Very popular. It's my firm belief, by assessing the storylines and what happens in all of them, that both Season 4 and Season 6 are the 2 additional seasons that were added in. We'll get to Season 6, which is by far the most divisive season of either Buffy or Angel amongst fans, but Season 4 is kind of the black sheep of the show. It's the transition between the high school setting of the first 3 seasons and the focus on more adult issues in the suburban setting of the final 3 seasons. It's stuck right in the middle, and I think because of the fact that it has the job of shifting the overall tone of the show, it suffers because of it. On any fan's list of favourite seasons, this one is normally towards the bottom of the list. However, if this is your favourite season, more power to you. The first time I watched the show, I saw this as one of my favourites, but over time, and as I've become more aware of the impact and sequence of events, this season doesn't really do much and feels like a bit of a mess. It doesn't help that a lot of the writing team was also working on Angel at the time, which had just started its first season, which came with a few of its own issues, which I expand upon in my Angel Season 1 video. I think this wasn't treated with as much attention to detail or as much care as, well, any of the other seasons. Let's find out for real though, as this is an episodic analysis of Season 4 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The season opens with Buffy's first day at UC Sunnydale, wandering around the campus and getting lost, getting yelled at to leave by a lecturer, and generally feeling like an outsider as Willow and Oz seem to be settling in just fine. Buffy's new roommate Kathy seems a bit energetic and she likes to snore extremely loudly during the night. Both Giles and Joyce seem preoccupied when she visits them. Joyce, after Buffy having left a few days earlier, has already stocked her room with crates from the museum, and Giles is too busy being a playboy with Olivia, who was an old friend of Giles back in his Ripper days. She meets Riley at the library, who's a TA to Professor Walsh, who teaches Psychology 105, a class which both Buffy and Willow are taking. He seems nice enough and helps Buffy find her way to the classroom when she's lost. Apart from him, there's Eddie, played by a young Pedro Pascal, funnily enough. Both him and Buffy get off to a good start, and Buffy can actually relate to him as he seems just as lost on campus as she is. After bidding him farewell, he's killed by a group of vampires led by Sunday, who kill students so they can steal their belongings in their dorm rooms without having to be invited. Buffy is upset when Eddie doesn't show up to class the next day, and later on spots him shiftily wandering around the campus where he's of course a vampire. Buffy stakes Eddie and Sunday attacks, almost getting the better of Buffy, so naturally Buffy flees. One silent and mysterious phone call later, Buffy heads back to her dorm room to sleep the next morning, where she finds all of her belongings gone and a note, seemingly written by herself, about how she's leaving college. That night Xander returns from his travels around the country, which weren't very vast as his car broke down and he had to work in a kitchen for a month and a half to afford the repairs. He's now back living with his parents, however now in the basement and having to pay rent. Buffy tells him about Sunday and how she's unsure if she can even beat her, considering every other member of the gang is preoccupied. Xander gives one of the best speeches of the show here about how Buffy is his hero, and whenever he's scared, he says, one of the most famous and iconic lines of the show, to himself, "What would Buffy do?" He gives her his full support, and the two quickly get to researching at the library and find where the first disappearance occurred. Sure enough, when they head to the building, Sunday and the gang are rummaging through Buffy's things, and Xander heads to round up the rest of the gang. While he's away doing so, Buffy falls through the glass skylight and has to take on Sunday and her gang on her own. She does so with a sprained arm, motivated after watching the class protector award get snapped in front of her. Oz, Willow and Xander arrive just as Buffy is finishing the job by staking Sunday, and the episode ends with the gang taking Buffy's stuff back to her dorm while an extremely late and out of breath Giles arrives, realising that his job is to be by Buffy's side. Everything seems peachy until the last scene where one of Sunday's vampires has escaped Buffy's wrath, only to be electrocuted and kidnapped by some military-looking guys. That being said, completely forget about that last scene for now, as it won't be brought up again for another 4, 5, 6 episodes. The theme here is Buffy's abilities as a Slayer, and how she is more than capable of handling things on her own if need be. That seems like a really odd way to start the season, but trust me, it becomes a recurring theme. Buffy is the Slayer, and though her friends have helped her overcome the more serious evils of the past, she's not a pushover. It takes her a while to adjust to dealing with some vampires on her own, having grown used to her friends' assistance, but it's a way of showing the viewer that Buffy is growing into a very capable and independent person. She's in college now, studying what she wants, and she's not used to being alone in it all. However, like human beings tend to do, she adjusts, even if by the end it doesn't mean jack squat as her friends come running back at the last minute. While it's not the weakest opener of the show, as it lays down the foundations for one of the issues the gang will face during the 22 episode run, it's not terribly strong either. The humour is a very noticeable change. It's more subtle in places now. For example, during the scene where Buffy and Willow are talking to Riley for the first time, Buffy says something cringeworthy as she feels awkward talking to someone she doesn't know. Willow continues talking and the characters pay no attention, while Buffy closes her eyes feeling embarrassed. The camera never focuses on any of them. It shows it all, and if you pick it up, you pick it up. If this were the first 3 seasons, they would have shown reaction shots to Buffy's awkwardness and then attempted to continue the conversation awkwardly. It's another way of showing the viewer that Buffy feels isolated, and when she's doing something that seems unnatural, Willow nor Riley are even paying attention to it. The humour hasn't all changed though, Xander still makes his funny sex jokes which are always intended to be taken at face value, but it's a step in a different direction. The phone call I mentioned happens at Joyce's house, and while it's never revealed who's on the other end during the episode, it's the first occasion of a crossover between Buffy and Angel, as in Angel's season premiere, Angel calls Buffy but pushes out and puts the phone down again, just to confirm to the viewer that there will be crossovers between the two shows, so if you're sceptical about watching Angel, there's a sense of comfort that Angel won't go too far down the rabbit hole on its own just yet. Buffy's roommate Kathy is getting on Buffy's nerves with how pernickety she is with certain things like labelling everything that's hers and making Buffy log phone calls so they can split the phone bill accordingly. After a run-in with a weird looking demon on campus, Buffy starts to act unlike herself, and after it's revealed that her and Kathy have been having the same disturbing dreams, Buffy is convinced that Kathy is evil. The gang all shrug it off, but Buffy is persistent, even collecting Kathy's toenails. Oh god, that's going to make me throw up. Changing the subject briefly, Buffy also meets Parker Abrams, a charming young man who she gets chatting to whilst trying to avoid running into Kathy. He seems to take a shine to Buffy and Buffy takes a shine to him, but of course, Kathy gets chatting to him too when he stops by to see Buffy, and this pushes Buffy over the edge. She starts acting almost homicidal, to Willow, so Oz and Xander have to tie her up while Giles tries to figure out what's going on. She quickly escapes and confronts Kathy, getting into a scrap which reveals that Kathy is in fact a demon. Giles realises that Kathy is a demon too, and the toenails are in fact still growing, which is a trait of demons apparently, who knew? Kathy is a demon who has run away from her kind to Earth, where she is disguising as a human so she can go to school. She was trying to steal Buffy's soul, which explains her odd dreams, so that if her kind came looking for her, they would take Buffy away as she wouldn't have a soul like a demon. Unfortunately, her demon master whatever shows up and takes Kathy away. In the closing scenes of the episode, Willow moves into the dorm room with Buffy. Now, I can't help but feel like we've seen this premise before. Yeah. Remember Ted from season 2? You know, where Buffy was convinced there was something abnormal about Ted but was shrugged off by her friends until it's revealed there is indeed something very abnormal about him, and everyone goes, oh my, Buffy was right! Seriously, although it's not an exact recreation scene by scene, I get some deja vu vibes here. The setup and resolution is exactly the same, and that's enough for me to call this one lackluster. I suppose it's done again to reinforce Buffy's awareness of demons, even when she can't sense them. She has a good gut instinct that should be trusted, having been a Slayer for about 3.5 years or so. It's that independence thing that's going to be brought up over and over this season, so get used to it. The relationship between Kathy and Buffy is a humorous one. I believe Noxon knew that the premise was a tad ridiculous as he played it for laughs, which is something we don't really see from her an awful lot, so I applaud the attempt at a change in tone. Buffy also meets Parker. It's about time she moved on from Angel, so introducing a new romantic interest is only natural. Let's just hope he's better than Scott Hope. Oz, on his way to talk to Buffy, walks past an unknown woman who gives him an almost knowing look, and the two share a moment as they pass by. Anyway, a jazzed up version of Ted. That's more grounded and consistent than Ted, but all in all, doesn't really do an awful lot in terms of story. Just a nice simple episode to ease us into the season. While at the Bronze one night, Willow runs into Harmony, who... Wait a second, she died. Oh, she's a vampire. She manages to get a nip at Willow. She threatens them that her boyfriend will kill them and storms off. Anya returns too as she visits Xander while he's at Giles' house, wishing to further their relationship together. Harmony walks along a makeshift mine to her boyfriend, who is Spike. Yeah, he's back again. He's on the hunt for the Gem of Mara, a magical ring that renders the wearer immortal, so if Spike put it on, he could go out in the sun or be staked and survive. Spike takes a moaning Harmony to a party to look for someone to eat, where they run into Buffy and Parker, who are on a date there. Buffy takes chase and Harmony reveals to Buffy that they're searching for the Gem of Mara, much to Spike's irritation. The next few scenes are relationship building as Anya goes to Xander's and lures him into bed where they sleep together. Spike and Harmony do the same in the mine, where they have a full-on bedroom, which I think is hilarious. And Buffy and Parker head back to his dorm room, where they do the same. I wonder why Oz and Willow aren't in this segment, that is odd. As Anya and Xander awkwardly put their clothes back on and Anya begins to realise that her feelings for Xander are more than just casual sex-based, Buffy wakes up to find an empty bed as Parker comes back with coffees in hand. He tells Buffy he'll call her and she leaves to tell all to Willow. And while Buffy waits for Parker's call, which doesn't seem to come, Spike finds the Gem of Amara after attempting to stake Harmony and doesn't kill her. Back at the library, Giles' house, the Buffyless gang discover by watching TV of all things that a massive sinkhole has appeared after Spike's digging, and they investigate finding Harmony, who confirms that Spike has found the Gem of Amara. Buffy spots Parker on campus, seemingly using the same lines he used on Buffy on another girl. Parker tells Buffy that what happened between them was just harmless fun and shouldn't be seen as anything serious, also reminding Buffy that it was her that put the moves on him, so he thought they were on the same page. He leaves as Spike appears in broad daylight and the two fight. She manages to get the ring off Spike's head where he somehow doesn't burst into flames immediately. Guess that's a pretty tough leather jacket, huh? The gang sit around the jail's house as Buffy decides she wants to give the ring to Angel in order for him to be immortal. Nice of her, I suppose. Oz is on his way there anyway, so he offers to take it to him while in LA for a gig. How do they know where Angel is, you might be asking? Well, it is later established that Willow and Cordelia frequently call each other to catch up, so we can assume that's how they know. Buffy talks to Willow about Parker and she starts to blame herself for what happened, while Willow enforces the obvious fact that he cleverly manipulated her to sleep with him. She wanders around campus alone, as do Harmony and Anya, who are all conflicted by the men in their lives as the episode ends. Firstly, Spike is back, and he's not as funny this time. During Lover's Walk, I reinforced that he was superb and owned every scene he was in, but having him compete with Harmony in every scene he's in, who is a character that is designed to make everything about herself, kind of overshadows his character, which was an odd decision to make. Parker is revealed to be a bit of a prick, sending Buffy into a complete meltdown over what she did wrong, when in reality it wasn't her fault at all. This idea that somehow you are to blame and all you want to do is fix things and better yourself to show the other person that you can grow, when in reality it had nothing to do with you, it was their issues that resulted in the split. Buffy constantly going over it in her head is bang on, let me tell you. Xander and Anya sleep together, which Anya seems to think will make her feelings for him go away, but that doesn't work as she only falls harder. Anya is the black sheep of the cast. She's not a human adjusting to the idea of having to live amongst demons. She's a demon adjusting to the idea of living amongst humans. She has no idea how society or relationships or emotions are supposed to work because of her 1,000-year spell as a vengeance-seeking monster. Anya was originally a human being, that won't be explored until much later, but it's nice to see the writers explore something a little more out of the box compared to the norm. This episode now continues the elements of its story on the Angel episode In the Dark, so be sure to check out my Angel Season 1 video after this one, or even watch them episode by episode in different tabs to get the crossovers as they happen. In an attempt to cheer up Buffy, who's still moping over Parker, the gang take her to a Halloween party at a frat house on campus. Things take a turn for the worse when the gang's fears start to come true because of a demonic symbol that's been painted on the house for the Halloween spirit, of course. Anya arrives late, spots something wrong, and grabs Giles, who chainsaws his way through the house to find Buffy. There they accidentally summon the fear demon Gaknar, who has been wreaking havoc on the house, but he's actually incredibly tiny and Buffy stomps on him, ending the episode.
Inscription under the illustration of Gaknar.
What's it say?
Actual size.
There's a lot of similarities between this episode and Nightmares from Season 1. By a country mile I prefer this episode to Nightmares, but fundamentally, the idea of people's fears and nightmares coming true has already been done by the show, and conveniently, all the fears talked about in Nightmares are completely different to the ones that this episode has. I suppose the gang have seen a lot more action and fears can change, especially once you're out of high school, but by that theory, you could just do this episode every couple seasons and it would be different every time. But yes, the execution here is better than in Nightmares. However, it is just padding. This episode does nothing new for this story. I mean, did you see how short my fucking explanation was? It just reinforces the theme that was established in The Freshman. However, I like seeing the characterization of the fears. For example, Oz fears he'll become a werewolf. You can see this as a fear of changing when he's not expecting it, perhaps in a public situation, but I like the idea that the wolf is something he can't control, so he has naturally a fear of part of himself. Xander fears being alone, none of the others can see or hear him, and he becomes irrelevant, something which he was tackling in the Zeppo, but we can see here that even though he's more confident than he was then, he still fears this to an extent. Willow fears her spells going wrong. She's insulted when Buffy makes fun of her lackluster incantations, and I mean, it's Willow's livelihood, so she's angered. Buffy fears not being able to help people, especially her friends. There's also an aspect of being alone, similar to Xander, which is more talked about in a romantic sense after Parker and Angel are both skedaddled. It's a shame we don't see more of Giles' fears here, especially since he's had a lot of experience around demons and such. I want to know what scares him about life, rather than not being able to read or getting lost like in Nightmares. These are more psychological fears that the demon is able to create, and I'd love to have seen Giles have to tackle this, rather than just busting in with a chainsaw at the end to save the day. Oh, here we go. Looking down the list of Buffy episodes, user ratings on IMDb brings out an odd discrepancy. As you reach the bottom of the list, you'll find the high 6s, but nothing under a 6.5, which I guess could be seen as pretty bland but enjoyable. Nightmares has an 8.3, what the fuck? Once you hit the bottom, you will find the subject of this section of the video lurking at the bottom alone on a 5.9. Now, what does that spell for my opinion here? Well, first we need to dive into who Tracy Forbes is. She had been a screenwriter for a couple of years prior to her one-season stint on Buffy, where for Season 4 she wrote 3 episodes. One of these 3 episodes, which we'll get to soon, is a very enjoyable and quirky episode. Almost a fan favourite, you could say. The other 2 are unanimously seen as some of the worst episodes of the show. And here we have the first of those 2. Beer Bad. Buffy, still whining over Parker, begins to drown her sorrows at a local college bar where Xander's just got a job as a bartender. She befriends 4 scholars and starts to excessively drink beer with them. Meanwhile, Oz and Willow have a date at the Bronze where Oz has a ridiculous amount of eye contact with Veruca, the lead singer of the band playing there, and also the girl he shared that moment with a few episodes ago. Willow isn't stupid and notices this. Buffy goes back to the bar the next night and gets so drunk she starts to act Neanderthal-like. She leaves on Xander's orders, and the 4 guys begin to turn into cavemen. Xander chases them out and alerts the owner, who reveals that he was the one who spiked their drink with a magic liquid that effectively devolves the drinker for about a day. On a completely separate note, Willow finds Parker at a nearby coffee store studying. She confronts him about what he did to Buffy, and the two share a conversation about the meanings of casual sex, and Parker attempts to manipulate Willow into sleeping with him. But Willow knows better and makes fun of him for it. Just then, the 4 cavemen show up conveniently with an unconscious girl in their hands. They knock the 2 of them out and accidentally set the store on fire. Back at the dorm, Xander finds Giles and the 2 go to Buffy to see what effect the beer's had on her, where she's gone completely cave woman, drawing on the walls of her room and attacks the 2 when they refuse to give her beer. She runs out and Xander goes after her when the smoke of the fire is spotted in the distance. Buffy goes to help, still a Neanderthal by the way, and assists in saving the girl, the 4 cavemen, and even Parker. In the closing scenes of the episode, Parker approaches Buffy and begins to apologise, thanking her for saving his life. Buffy responds by hitting him over the head with a massive stick. This episode is crap. I know it's a common trend amongst Buffy fans to call this episode underrated now that the show's been off the air for nearly 20 years and there's no point in getting upset about bad episodes, but I struggle to find anything redeeming about it. The plot is underdeveloped and doesn't even have a proper resolution. I mean, seriously, Xander just tells the bar owner off and that's it. And we never see him get arrested or Buffy knock him out. Nothing! There's an obvious layer of, I would say, subtext, but it's not subtle at all. Beer equals bad, hence the title. Apparently the writers were taking advantage of funding supported by an American drug prevention organisation, but this episode was obviously so ridiculous and unrealistic that the organisation refused to fund it. Buffy has never made itself out to be completely grounded in reality, but this is lame, even comparing it to Season 1. Buffy effectively gets over Parker in this episode thanks to the beer, so I guess drowning your sorrows does work, kids. Go ahead and try. The only redeeming quality here I can think of at all is Giles, who had the funniest lines and scenes because of how out of place he is to what's going on around him. Definitely funnier than watching a nearly 3-minute long scene of the cavemen jumping around and terrorising people. Also, clearly Sarah Michelle Gellar didn't want to be subjected to the cavemen makeup that the others had, so she's just herself, which doesn't make any sense as she's supposed to have drunk just as much as the others. Buffy saves the people at the store in the climax because deep down, Slayers always know their duty. This is foreshadowed by some of her drawings on the wall, which introduce an element that won't be brought up until the very end of the season. I'm not kidding, like the last couple episodes of this series. It's rubbish, but not the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. Hell, I wouldn't even say it's the worst episode of this season. I jokingly refer to this episode as cheat bad, given its very clear message and plotline. I mentioned back in my Season 2 video that there were 3 episodes featured in what the writers called the Willow-Oz trilogy, and this is the second of that trilogy, and it's somehow worse than beer bad. Let me start from the beginning. Oz and Veruca continue to stare at each other, much to Willow's annoyance, and as a surprise to no one, Veruca is actually a werewolf running into Oz one night when he escapes from his cage, and they chase down Professor Walsh. Oz, for some inexplicable reason, doesn't tell anyone about Veruca being a werewolf, so one day she drops by his cage, and the 2 get it on as werewolves. Willow arrives the next morning, finds the 2, and bawls her eyes out. Through her anger, she plans to curse both Oz and Veruca. Meanwhile, Buffy and Oz track down Veruca to the forest where they find a decoy of her clothes, throwing them off of her actual scent. As they rush to Willow, who has decided not to curse Oz because she loves him too much, Buffy runs into one of the military-looking guys, out of fucking nowhere. Oz reaches Willow first, who's being cornered by Veruca. The sun sets as Oz attacks and kills Veruca. Buffy arrives and tranquilizes Oz, as Willow cries some more. The next day, Oz packs his bags, telling Willow that she, nor anyone, is safe as long as he can control the werewolf, so he buggers off to find himself or something. I hate this episode. And it's not necessarily the writing team's fault. Originally they wanted a season-long love triangle between Willow, Oz and Veruca, and boy am I glad that never happened. Seriously, I couldn't stand this temptation crap for 2 episodes, imagine it for a whole season. This didn't happen because Seth Green wanted to film a movie, so the writers, feeling butthurt about his wanting to film something else apart from their show, decided to make his character unlikable in order to get him out for a few episodes. I don't like jumping the gun, but Oz never returns as a recurring character in the show. The story naturally progressed while Green was filming something else, and they decided just not to renew his contract after this season. One other thing I didn't bring up because it has nothing to do with the rest of this episode. is the cold open. Spike gets kidnapped by the military guys. This isn't continued until the next episode, which begs the question, why not just do it in the next episode? As it makes this section of the season feel like a complete mess. They're too busy setting up the future of the show that they're not focusing on the quality of the show as it runs. Add in the messy Willow and Oz breakup. I have no doubt in my mind that this episode is worse overall than Be or Bad. That was an episode that was mainly bad because the one-off story was piss poor. This episode is mainly bad because its overarching story is piss poor. Seriously, how terrible is this show at writing breakups that aren't Buffy's? Cordelia and Xander's back in season 3 was somehow not as sudden and ridiculous as this. They torture Willow here, and one of the only things I will praise is how believable Alison Hannigan's acting is. She is a great actress, compared to Seth Green, who is teetering on the edge of his acting ability throughout this entire episode. I never want to sit through this one again, but it's entirely unskippable for the story's sake. God in heaven. We catch up with Spike after he was kidnapped at the beginning of last episode, and he looks to be in some sort of lab with many demons and such locked inside of small rooms. He gets talking to the vampire we saw get captured in the first episode about how they starve the captured to the point where they drink or eat whatever's given to them, which knocks them out so they can experiment. In other news, Riley gets talking with his two friends Forrest and Graham about Buffy. They have a conversation with Parker which ends with Riley punching him in the face.
I just didn't like hearing him talk about Buffy that way. I think that... Well, I guess I like her.
While Spike manages to escape the facility he's trapped in, Riley visits Buffy's dorm where only Willow currently is, and he asks for her assistance in asking Buffy out. Willow reluctantly accepts as Spike visits Harmony to try and patch things up between the two, which doesn't work as Spike's too obsessed with killing Buffy. Buffy, who's currently at a house party, gets horribly hit on by Riley, and the two's relationship doesn't even get off the ground. Giles and Xander take over for Buffy by patrolling for the military guys that Buffy ran into last episode, to no avail.
Oh, shut up.
Xander, however, does find Harmony, and the two get into the most heated battle the show's ever seen. Harmony lets Xander know that Spike is back, and he goes to find Buffy at the party. Riley, Forrest and Graham retire to the secret military base that's underneath their frat house, as you do, and Professor Walsh is the head of their military operations. This is the Initiative, a top-secret government operation to discover more about the demon world and how it all works. I mentioned back in my Season 1 video about the FBI and how I'd like to have seen them more involved with the show's plots on occasion. This is the closest we get, and they're less interested in trying to cover everything up and more interested in just grabbing any demons they can find and dissecting them. Walsh sends the troublesome trio and their squad of nameless, faceless TAs after Spike, or Hostile 17 as they so cleverly name him. While Riley and Buffy have a standoff, both unaware that they're trying to get the other to safety, Spike finds Buffy's dorm room through some research and gets to Willow alone. He attempts to bite her but can't because of an intense pain in his head. The Initiative boys find Spike and raid the dorms to capture him. Spike somehow manages to escape as Buffy joins the fight, and the Initiative boys retreat in failure. It's here where we find out that Spike has had an inhibitor chip surgically inserted into his brain that shocks and fries his brain every time he attempts to harm, and I quote Riley here, any living being in any way. Now this explains why he couldn't bite Willow, but they say here, harm any living being, which means punching, kicking, throwing or barging is just as likely to send that shock. However, Spike manages to escape the Initiative, shove Willow onto the bed forcefully, and then later escape the Initiative boys without setting the chip off once. The only time it goes off is when he's trying to bite Willow, and if you're thinking they just wrote Riley's explanation line wrong or something, no they didn't. Spike can and no longer harm human beings in any way whatsoever, and the chip is never wrong. So how does he do all this? James Marsters is added onto the opening credits to replace Seth Green now, so I love that we're going to see more of Spike now that he's a regular. But they really need to fix this storyline as soon as possible because it's broken as all fuck. Riley and Buffy share a little moment at the end of the episode as Riley realises that he has feelings for Buffy. I like Mark Lucas, I like Riley, but there are some points where I feel like the writing for his character, and especially the writing for Forrest, isn't very good. Like, at all. Forrest isn't a well-liked character, but I will admit the banter he has in the first scene is pretty funny. But the acting is just off somehow. There's not an awful lot of chemistry between Riley and Forrest for me to believe they're actually friends. Graham hardly says anything, so I really struggle to find an opinion on him, but let's hope there's more development between these three so I can change my mind. Parker also makes his final appearance here, getting his just desserts too, fitting. Look, my biggest problem with the season so far is that I feel like there's an awful lot of new stuff being introduced all at once, and it's kind of got me an overload, so let's bring Angel back for an episode. After Doyle's vision at the end of the last Angel episode, Angel hurries to Sunnydale afraid that Buffy may be in trouble. Xander, meanwhile, gets a job as a construction worker, and as he begins digging to establish the site where a new cultural centre will be built, he falls through the floor and ends up unleashing the spirit of a Native American right around Thanksgiving, and he's dead set on getting revenge. Buffy plans to cook Thanksgiving dinner for the gang since Joyce is out of town and wants everything to be perfect. They track down some of the murders that the native spirit has caused, while Angel colludes with Giles and Willow to avoid running into Buffy. Xander somehow gets infected with syphilis, which I'm pretty sure is a sexually transmitted disease, so God knows what that native spirit did to you while you were down in that hole, Xander. A broken Spike appears, having been rejected by Harmony a second time, and he's tied up in the living room when the natives attack. Yes, now there's multiple all of a sudden. Angel assists in taking them out, still unbeknownst to Buffy, and he departs, having helped save her without having to actually speak to her at all. Guess the temptation is too much, huh? Just as Angel thinks he's gotten away without Buffy knowing, Xander lets it slip at the dinner table. This is a really funny episode, and one that reminds me an awful lot of Season 3. I know, what a surprise, an episode of this season of this show reminds me of another season. Seems pretty dumb to mention, but Season 4 so far has been quite alienating. Instead of naturally progressing storylines into existence, it takes a new approach by dumping everything about the initiative all at once, and then lets it develop on its own. It's not the worst way of doing things, but it's not the best either. On the subject of the initiative, they attempt to track down Spike, fail, and then call it a day. Time for the Thanksgiving holiday. They are really not in a rush to sell this plotline to first-time viewers, and that's disappointing. Besides that, Angel comes back for this episode, and he's here to promote his own show. That's it. He adds nothing here, really, but it's obvious the tone of his character has changed quite drastically since he was last on Buffy. He has a much more upbeat tone of voice, and he laughs a few times, like, this isn't Buffy Angel, this is Angel if you catch my drift. Spike is beginning to be implemented into the gang permanently as he's reluctantly thrown into things since he has nowhere else to go. He's more of a Cordelia replacement rather than an Oz replacement, as he's the doubter character now. He basically takes a piss out of Buffy and the gang while they attempt to save the day. He pretty much ends up like an archery target by the end, and when the spirit turns into a bear...
A bear! You made a bear!
I didn't mean to.
Undo it! Undo it!
Aside from that, there's a clear message about Thanksgiving and the reasons for it happening, which was of course the massacring of the natives. Willow wants this to be brought to light more, and Giles tries to tell her that it's a part of history and they can't change that. It's not until Spike arrives and he speaks some common sense about ancient wars and that trying to talk sense into these dead natives is never going to work. Yeah, Willow has good intentions, but she's pretty dumb here with this plan. This episode now continues elements of its story in the Angel episode, I Will Remember You. What an improvement over Beer Bad. Spike is being held at Giles' place while they try to get more information out of him about the military boys, who the gang still doesn't know about fully. Willow comes up with an idea to do a truth spell, but after discovering Oz had sent for his stuff, meaning that he doesn't plan on coming back anytime soon, she spirals out of control and abuses magic by doing a spell that will have her will done so she can wish away her pain. Since she missed doing the spell on Spike, Giles checks in on her and the two get into an argument, which results in Willow saying that Giles doesn't see anything, and this causes him to go blind. After conversations with Xander and Buffy, more stuff begins to go wrong. Spike and Buffy get engaged and start planning their wedding, Xander becomes a demon magnet, and Amy momentarily becomes human again. This causes havoc as Buffy runs into Riley and tells him she's getting married to someone else, leaving him dumbfounded as they just had their first date earlier in the episode. Xander figures out that it's Willow behind everything, as Willow herself is approached by D'Hoffryn, the leader of the Vengeance Demons, and he offers to recruit her. Willow declines and asks D'Hoffryn to put everything back to normal, which he does. She apologises to the gang, and Buffy has to convince Riley she was joking about getting married. Yeah, it's a good episode. Although there isn't much developed here at all, Willow and Oz are officially established as over, and confirming to the audience that he isn't coming back as a regular. The authenticity of these comedic moments is what sells this episode. One of my favourite moments is when Buffy asks Giles to walk her down the aisle instead of her own father.
Oh, Buffy, that's so... Oh, for God's sake, this is nonsense.
It's such a heartwarming moment that is completely ruined by how manufactured the whole situation is. Although the show has had a bit of a rough patch recently, it briefly picks back up again here and remains quite enjoyable for a few episodes, doing little wrong. The first of the big three. The big three are the three episodes that everyone unanimously agrees upon as some of the best episodes the show ever had. The whole gimmick with this episode is that no one speaks. Almost the entire episode is without any dialogue and told through actions, and this idea is spectacular. The story itself is nothing out of the ordinary. A group called the Gentlemen arrive in Sunnydale and take all the voices of the townspeople away so that they can take the hearts of 7 random victims without them screaming, as the sound of a human voice is the Gentleman's Achilles heel. The gang panic before figuring everything out, and Buffy is sent to the Sunnydale clock tower where the Gentlemen are hiding. Riley does the same, for the initiative of course, and the two run into each other, revealing their secrets in a thrilling scene where neither can actually explain what's going on since they have no voices. They bring back the voices, kill the Gentleman with a terribly dubbed over scream, and the day is saved. In the final scene, Riley and Buffy sit down to talk about what they've just found out about each other, before sitting in an awkward silence. Oh, this episode is great. I think everyone has doubts about season 4 at times, but this is undoubtedly iconic in its comedy, writing, direction. Joss Whedon was so pernickety with making sure every actor did every action exactly right, that many of the cast members ended up citing this as one of the hardest episodes they had to film, despite having hardly any lines, and Buffy and Riley take the majority of the limelight here. They now know each other is hiding something just when the relationship seemed like it was taking off. Buffy wanted a normal boyfriend after Angel, and Riley was supposed to be that normal boyfriend until he's working for the military in a secret demon research operation. That's not all though, as Willow joins the Wicca group and discovers that they're not at all aware of witches actually being real and just pose as them. All but one, that is, as this particular girl actively seeks out Willow when the gentlemen chase her, and the two join hands, feeling each other's magical energy, and move objects and perform spells that seem so advanced to them both individually. This is Tara, and we'll talk more about her in the future once things unravel more, but I digress. I heavily recommend you seek this episode out and watch it already if you haven't. You've probably heard everyone talk about how great it is, and it is great, one of the best. Telling you about it wouldn't do it justice. Ironically, saying nothing and letting you watch it would be the most accurate way to portray that greatness. Buffy at its strongest, during one of its weakest seasons, and that's why I love this stupid show. It never stops surprising you. 3 fucking writers, holy hell. This episode is pretty much part 2 to Hush, but considering that episode's gimmicky premise, I prefer to look at the two standalone. Picking up right from where we left off, Riley and Buffy finally get chatting about things when an earthquake hits, causing Buffy to panic as, if you remember the last time there was an earthquake, Buffy fucking died. Spike now moved in with Xander, although that happened last episode, it only feels fitting to bring it up now, and they start to disagree about living together, which is what you'd expect. Demons at the Initiative are going wild, taking Riley and Forrest by surprise, and Buffy feels that something stinks about this earthquake, although Jill shrugs her off because it's California, and earthquakes happen all the time, and this isn't the end of the world, and Buffy is overreacting, and of course it's the end of the world. Willow goes to a party and runs into Percy, remember him? I don't blame you if you don't, he was that student that Willow had to tutor for a very brief point in the previous season, and he didn't really add much to the story, but they finally bring him back to finish whatever the hell arc he had going on, and he just reverts back to being a prick again like he was in his first episode. Fantastic character development there, fellas. Who's placing bets on Martin Auction right in this part? Willow finds a dead body with carvings, and the gang soon have to stop Armageddon again. The sacrifice of 3 is a ritual where 3 demons will throw themselves into the Hellmouth in order to start the end of the world, so the gang return to the burnt down Sunnydale High in order to stop them. Spike discovers here that he can punch demons, and I'll be pissing and moaning about that very soon. The gang stops it, go home, and Bob's your uncle. There's an abnormal amount of filler and, well, crap in this episode. It was originally supposed to be written by Douglas Petrie, but he was getting married, so the script was thrown together over a weekend, despite the entire writing team having an extreme case of writer's block, because they wrote the story out in a corner. A lot of compromises were made, the most notable being Spike can hurt a living being. Yes, fuck you, Riley, and your terrible explanation. Why can he do this? Look, I'm fine with the idea that he can't hurt human beings, but this has been explained so terribly. They keep retconning this shit, and it's only been around since 4 episodes ago. This is so obviously being made up as they go along. There is no overall end goal here. A basic plot outline for the season, maybe, but they just filled in the gaps as they went. It's not the only season 4 of a Buffyverse show to do this, and those who know what I'm talking about understand completely, but this is so unlike the show. There's no main villain, and we're halfway through the season. Shit keeps happening but having no real purpose. Look, earlier in the episode, Spike tries to stake himself, and Willow convinces Xander to bring Spike along with him so that he doesn't try it again. Why does Willow care what happens to Spike? He's an arsehole to the gang and always has been. He joins them and surprise surprise, he does act like an arsehole and it puts the two in a really shit mood. What the fuck was the point in any of that? They're keeping Spike alive despite the fact he doesn't know anything about the Initiative. Buffy already knows everything there is to know from Riley, so he's just here for no justifiable reason. Spike hangs around. Don't get me wrong, I like Spike. But I want his character given a reason to exist, not just hanging around because the show needs a character to stir up shit. Oh, and I hope you like Tara from the previous episode because she just doesn't appear here at all. Riley's added to the main credits though, so we'll be seeing more of him. Look, Doomed is an odd episode in the season because its entire purpose is to fix all the shit done wrong in the first half of the season so that the second half feels more like the show we've come to know. It's far, far from perfect. But let's hope the second half of the season picks things up a bit. Because I can already tell it's going to be a mad dash to introduce a villain, get them set up with motives, and then have Buffy kill them like she always does. Finally, a Giles episode, and now that we're in the second half of the season, it's apparently finally time to start introducing the actual villain, except not just yet. Basically, Buffy turns 19 and Giles begins to realise his age and how out of touch he can be with the gang sometimes. He pays a visit to Professor Walsh, who he grows to detest after she claims Buffy lacks a male role model in her life. Earlier on in the episode, Professor Walsh also finds out that Buffy is the Slayer, and they plan to transition her into the Initiative. How exciting! Anyway, Giles' point is further proved when he discovers that Riley is part of the Initiative, and he's literally the only person Buffy never told. Yeah, Willow and Xander know, Anya and Spike know, but Giles has been kept in the dark. He runs into Ethan Rayne, remember him? Apparently the writers just did, because he catches up with Giles during a night out at the pub and informs him of 314, a top-secret government experiment that the mere thought of terrifies the underworld. Of course it wouldn't be an Ethan episode without him messing with Giles, so he turns him into a demon. Nobody can understand Giles, and since he wrecked his own apartment earlier in the day, the gang believe Giles to have been attacked by a demon instead. Spike is the only one who understands Giles, though, running into him while checking out some crypts to move into, sick of living with Xander, and he helps Giles locate Ethan while escaping the Initiative, who are hot on their trail after Giles decided to scare the living daylights out of Professor Walsh. Giles attacks Ethan, however Buffy and Riley have been tracking Ethan too, and Buffy manages to stab Giles in the chest with a letter opener, which luckily is actually made of real silver, so instead of killing Giles, it returns him to normal? Ethan is then arrested by the Initiative, pending evaluation, and we never see him again. Buffy apologises to Giles and Maggie Walsh has a brief chat with Riley, which he reveals he's in love with Buffy. That was quick, and she leaves to enter the fabled 314. Unlike other Giles-centric episodes we've seen thus far, this one is far more silly, although that probably has something to do with Jane Espenson writing it. I like Giles in a more comedic light. I personally have no preference over the serious style like with the Dark Age or Helpless, because this character is so universally relatable and fits into these settings well. A couple of things I didn't touch on is the relationship building that the other characters do, such as Buffy and Riley and Willow and Tara, who returns from Hush, which adds little bits of context to the whole underworld being spun out of control by 314. As Willow and Tara attempt to perform a fairly straightforward magic spell, which goes a bit wrong, Buffy begins her entrance into the Initiative, which will be developed more later. Aside from that, Ethan Rayne makes his final appearance here, although like many other underutilized characters, he does return in the comics. I've always thought they should have used him more. It's almost like the writers completely forgot about him after this, and I think he would have made a great big bad for this season, considering we're sorely lacking one currently, and mild spoilers, he would have been far better than the one we actually get. Robin Sachs performed the character well, and made him one of the most likeable villains that the show ever had. His 4 episodes are among some of my favourites, and after his passing, his performance on the show has become more treasured to me. The majority of the season is told through 2-part episodes from this point forward, although not exclusively. I guess it's about time they finally get shit moving, since we've been at a relative standstill since Hush. As Buffy begins to wow the Initiative, being integrated into the program, Willow and Tara have a discussion in which Tara wishes to give Willow a family heirloom of hers. Willow declines, and then also declines to perform spells with Tara that evening because she has plans with Buffy, and Tara might feel out of place. Tara is hurt, but attempts to hide it as they part. Maggie Walsh enters the fabled 314, being assisted by Dr. Angleman, a character who is very clearly going to be killed off in the near future, and the project is revealed to be a human-cyborg-demon hybrid named Adam. That's right, some of the demon parts that the Initiative have been collecting have been added to this monster of a creation. Moving on though, Buffy arrives late to the bronze meetup with the gang, and also brings the Initiative boys as a sort of impromptu celebration for her joining the team. Not only does that make Willow upset that she could have invited Tara, but then Buffy is suddenly beeped away by her new pager with the rest of the Initiative boys to track down a Polgara demon. They sweep the area in teams, and Forrest begins to become annoyed by Buffy's presence, and how Riley chose her to be second in command and not him. They encounter Spike though and attempt to capture him. Spike somehow throws a guy against a tree without his chip going off, although he does make this weird noise. There's no way that's meant to be the chip. It's a searing pain through his brain. They've just fucked it up again. Anyway, he escapes, but the boys manage to plant a tracker on him unbeknownst to Spike. Willow goes to visit Tara, and the two plan to do spells all night. Yeah, that's all. What follows is one of the most ridiculous scenes in the whole show. This montage of Buffy and Riley fighting and capturing the Polgara demon to flashes of them having intimate sex. Oh, it's so stupid. It's odd. This is bizarre, man. I'm not quite sure if it's meant to be artsy or what, but it's weird. I suppose it's trying to prove the point that Buffy's never had a boyfriend she can do this with for pleasure on a regular basis. There was a less sudden way to do this, though. I add in Maggie Walsh watching them from a monitor. This is fucking off the wall. What is going on? The next morning, Buffy finds Riley still in bed with her in a clear homage to when Partridge's dipped the next morning, and as soon as she starts asking Riley about 314, he's beeped away by Maggie Walsh, who's
always watching.
While Spike gets help from the Buffyless gang about his tracker issue, Maggie and Dr. Angleman agree that Buffy is becoming a liability and plan to kill her. Jesus, alright. Riley is sent out with the rest of the Initiative boys to track Spike, but Maggie has a separate job for Buffy. This is, of course, a trap, and Maggie watches as Buffy supposedly dies. Why is Maggie suddenly psychotic? They never hinted this at all. I mean, she teaches psychology and all, but she acts irrationally. Plus, it's clear that there's a history between her and Adam. Maybe he's her son that died, or a soldier she was close to, and she's trying to bring him back as an experiment. Guess what? It's Never explained, not in the show anyway. Riley returns from failing to find Spike after the gang managed to flush the tracker down the toilet, and Maggie informs him that Buffy is dead. Buffy, clearly still alive because there's 3 more seasons to go, picks up the small camera and tells Maggie that she's caught on, much to Riley's shock. He storms off and Maggie, quite upset, visits Adam and talks to his sleeping body. Adam suddenly awakens and stabs Maggie, killing her.
Mommy.
Oh, Jesus. The gang gets a visit from Riley and Buffy has to tell him the truth about what happened, but Riley is still hesitant to believe it.
By the by, if you're trying to kill her,
They hide from the Initiative in Xander's basement, where they hear about a brutal killing of a young boy. This is, of course, by Adam, who just managed to walk out of the Initiative without anyone noticing and kill a little boy just because he was curious about how he worked. The gang thinks the Polgara demon has escaped, still in the dark about Adam's existence, and Buffy goes to the crime scene to investigate. The Initiative boys find out that Maggie's dead, and it causes tension between Riley and Forrest, the latter believing that Buffy might have something to do with Maggie's death. Riley instructs his team to search for the Polgara demon too, and then Riley bumps into Buffy at the crime scene. He tells her Maggie's dead, and then asks her if she's happy about it, to which Buffy is clearly not. Willow attempts to get Tara to help her with the locating spell, but Tara is skeptical and pretends to perform the spell, which she doesn't for some reason, and that can be forgotten about until next season. Buffy searches for information at Willie's bar. Remember him? I feel like I'm saying that a lot. Simpler times perhaps. Anyway, he doesn't know anything. Suddenly Riley is. He appears clearly out of it, and he attempts to shoot a patron of the bar just to prove a point to Buffy. He is unlike the Riley we know, being disrespectful to Buffy and jittering like mad. Buffy takes him back to Xander's to rest, and she and Xander head to the Initiative to find out more. Riley heads out for her shortly after, pushing Willow aside, and he's off too like a shot. Buffy and Xander successfully sneak in and interrogate Dr. Engelman, which is where they discover that the military's been pumping the Initiative boys with drugs and that Riley's currently going through a withdrawal, explaining his actions. And Riley joins them too, but it doesn't last long as Adam's back. Yeah, he's returned to find out more about himself and why he exists. See, I don't think Adam was quite finished when he woke up, and there are many flaws in his programming and design that give him much more freedom in his thoughts. So he naturally questions life and shit, but he's a robot demon man. He threatens to reveal Maggie's original plan for both himself and Riley, but then Riley attacks him, which doesn't end well, and Adam kills Dr. Engelman. Riley, injured quite badly, is taken to the Initiative's infirmary as Adam escapes, and Buffy and Willow ponder about the dangerous Adam now lurking out there. That was long. But the point of this episode is to introduce Adam, our big bad for this season, or half season considering what point he comes in at. It'll be no surprise to anyone when I tell you that Maggie Walsh was supposed to be the big bad, but Lindsay Krause, who played Maggie, had scheduling conflicts and had to part ways with the show earlier than planned. So Adam it is, and just Adam. According to a non-canon comic written by Jane Espenson, Adam was a soldier who was killed in action by a demon corpse possessed by the mayor. Yeah, fuck that. Adam was a guy and now he's not. There's your story and I fucking enjoy it. Seriously, Adam is so underdeveloped, but I guess it doesn't matter to Buffy since she just has to stop him. He's not whoever he once was, but coming up after the next couple episodes is a couple of one-offs where they very well could have given Adam more attention and developed a backstory, but they just decide not to. It's an odd choice, really an odd choice. They could have brought back Ethan Rayne and had him be involved, but listen to me, I sound like Captain Hindsight. There's just a lot of issues here, and I like to be thorough with these videos. One thing I didn't bring up was Spike. He appears in the Iron Team heavily, but he gets like one scene in Goodbye Iowa where he gets thrown out of Willie's bar by the other demons because he's been seen with the Slayer and has helped her from time to time, most notably in Doomed. This is a fine set of episodes, but it's noticeably lacking in some departments. This is what we've been leading up to. All that stuff that the show has been setting up is finally coming together, and I'm just not that into it. Like I mentioned before, Season 4 used to be one of my favourites during my first watch, but there's a painful amount of nothingness here. Faith is back. She awakens from her coma, to no surprise whatsoever, it was only a matter of time. The gang are busy looking for Adam, which has apparently been going on for a couple of days at least, but to no avail. Riley leaves the medical bay at the Initiative against the Initiative boys' advice and returns to Buffy, claiming to have quit the military altogether so that they can be together. Faith meanwhile beats up a girl and takes her clothes, leaving at the front door of all things. The doctors begin to panic and rush around trying to find leads as to where she got to, while a nurse makes a phone call for a team to be sent out. Faith is only just finding out what exactly went down on graduation day, figuring out that she's been asleep for far longer than she feels and that the mayor is indeed dead and failed. The gang find out about Faith waking up and proceed to calmly shit themselves.
I'd say this qualifies for a worst timing ever award.
Faith finds Buffy and Willow on campus and taunts the two before the police arrive and Faith flees. While the gang searches for Faith that night, the nurse is revealed to have been planted at the hospital by the Watchers Council, and the team she spoke about sending arrives. Faith, still on the run from the cops, receives a tape from a mysterious demon who she doesn't keep alive long enough to find out the whole story, and it's from the mayor. He gives Faith a strange device promising her a fresh start in case his ascension fails. Faith then visits Joyce, who makes her first appearance appearance in 11 episodes and holds her captive, believing that Buffy won't come for her since she hasn't come by in a while. Faith is wrong, however, and Buffy arrives through the window as the fight heads downstairs. Giles returns home from failing to find Faith, only to find the Watchers Council team inside his living room, waiting to speak to him. Faith uses the weird gift she received from the mayor on her and Buffy, and the two swap bodies. Yep, the mayor offered Faith a way to make her a new life for herself by becoming somebody else. Faith, for some reason, decides to use this on Buffy to, I guess, ruin her reputation or something. Faith, now in Buffy's body, answers a few questions from the police, from a different detective this time, thank God, and then takes a bath. Willow and Tara are pretty much confirmed to be a thing at this point, in a scene where Tara tells Willow that she belongs to her. The Watchers Council kidnap Buffy in Faith's body by very riskily crashing their van into the police squad car. Faith runs around the town mad, meanwhile, attending a Scooby meeting to act unlike how Buffy would, and then proceeds to tease Spike at the Bronze in a sexual manner. See, Spike and Faith have never met, so Spike doesn't suspect a thing here, which makes some sort of sense. As Adam befriends a group of vampires asking them to be his minions, Willow attempts to introduce Tara to Buffy, but Faith is less than welcoming, figuring out almost immediately that the relationship between the two is more serious than Willow lets on. Tara, a bit hurt by some of the things that the Faith-possessed Buffy says, also figures out that Buffy isn't Buffy because of her aura. She tells Willow and the two hurry to perform a ritual to locate Buffy's real aura. Faith visits Riley and coerces him into bed like any man would do with his seemingly normal girlfriend, except when he tells her that he loves her for the first time. Faith freaks out, utterly confused, and flees, getting into a brief altercation with Forrest. The council team realises that they won't be able to transport Faith to England, so they plan to kill her. Buffy's prepared for this and manages to escape from the team and heads to Giles' place, where she manages to convince him that she's actually Buffy. Willow and Tara arrive with a magically created Catra, which can swap the two back as long as they can actually find Faith, who's actually fleeing the country this time, but doesn't after finding out about a situation at a local church where a group of Adam's henge vamps have taken the churchgoers hostage. The gang finds this out too, and before long they're all there, including Riley, who was just late for church. Faith manages to kill a few of the vampires before Buffy shows up, and the two begin another brawl, this time ending with the two swapping back into their normal bodies. The next day, Riley tells the real Buffy that he had sex with her while Faith was in her body, which troubles the two, as the real Faith flees yet again in the back of a cargo train. I'm pleased they did this over 2 episodes, and while the plot of two characters swapping bodies is really cliched at this point, I don't particularly hate it. The council's back, and instead of just taking Faith in custody while she was in the coma, they wait and pay the price. We will see these guys again, although not on Buffy, but I don't feel like we see enough of them here. On Angel, they get more screen time and get given personalities, but they're just 3 henchmen here, with really sloppy ways of doing their jobs. We see some lust shown between Spike and Buffy when Faith confronts him at the Bronze. Spike's obsession with killing the Slayer has been made abundantly clear, but this hints at another reason for his obsession. To be truthful, Faith's body swap here doesn't affect the main plotline much, it just shakes up Buffy and Riley significantly. Buffy feels like she's been cheated on, but in reality, Riley didn't know anything was wrong. He didn't do anything out of order. It's going to be a point of contention over the next few episodes. Adam makes no appearance in this year's Girl, which is worrying for the whole big bad aspect of his character, but he does re-emerge in Who Are You and convinces a whole team of vampires to worship him. He's like a Jesus figure to them. He's more than man or machine or even demon, because he's all 3 of them at the same time. I like the idea of Adam as a character, but as a main villain, or should I say, a main villain with only maybe 7 or 8 episodes to develop, is pretty lame. The Master was funny, Angelus was terrifying and twisted, the Mayor was incredibly likeable and was given sufficient screen time in order to do so. He was even hinted at during the prior season to which he appeared in, but Adam is just thrown in here. We learn about his existence in the episode prior to which he appears in, but that's not even him, it's just the number, 314. Adam debuts as the main villain in his first episode. This isn't the season premiere, people, there are no excuses. Having Whedon return to write an episode is always a treat, but I don't feel he hits the nail on the head with this one compared to his other contributions to the show. Okay, the last episode he wrote was Hush, so maybe I'm being unfair with that comparison, but it's a cliched storyline with good moments, don't get me wrong, but Faith needed more time to recover from the Mayor's death, and I don't feel like she did. She just jumps into things again like nothing happened. Alright, my gripes here are resolved in the 2-parter she gets on Angel, which is much more of what I was expecting to be here, but it's fine. Fine, that's a word I'm using an awful lot this season. What does that tell you? It's this season's Jonathan episode. Wait a minute. The almighty Jonathan. You gotta love it. The miserable gang has always required Jonathan's help to save the day and take out a vamp's nest. Buffy and Riley are still at arm's length from each other due to the Faith situation from last episode, and Buffy seeks advice from the all-knowing creator of the hit show Empire. Even Riley needs advice, and it's the two sharing a moment at everyone's favourite jazz club, the Bronze. The fun doesn't last long though, as Karen, a stalker of Jonathan's, comes running in telling of a dangerous interaction she's had with a monster. Jonathan is on the case, and Karen tells him about a mark that was located on the monster, which leaves Jonathan a bit shaken up. That's odd. Anyway, he has the same mark tattooed on him, but that's entirely irrelevant. Buffy doesn't think so though, as usual, and gets the gang to reluctantly help investigate. Buffy believes that Jonathan may have altered the universe, allowing him to be perceived differently to what he may be seen as in his native universe. The gang do some more sleuthing as Jonathan and Buffy hunt down the monster and reveal that Jonathan did use a spell to alter the universe, and that killing the monster is key to changing everything back. Jonathan's actually the one to push the demon to its doom, and the world is changed back to its old familiar self. In the end, Jonathan approaches Buffy and apologises, swiftly leaving until he's needed again a few seasons later. This episode does everything that a regular episode of Buffy shouldn't, but it still works. The writing team loved experimenting with dropping the viewer into a drastically augmented reality to what they're used to, and then explaining everything later on. It's something the show would come back to in the future, and I've always seen this as the prototype to the iconic plotline we eventually get. From what I see online, this episode isn't well liked. I think it's because, unlike other one-off silly episodes, the plot actually continues progressing. Jonathan is around and continues to be king of the world, but we hear about what's going on with Buffy and Riley, who eventually make up, and Buffy learns to forgive Riley for sleeping with Faith. That all happens while Jonathan is the biggest celebrity in the world. That's just happening at the same time, and the show hadn't really done that before. With stuff like the Zeppo and Doppelgangland, the majority of the main plot wasn't really progressed. A couple of plot lines were started in these episodes, but it allowed the one-off to work as a one-off. Here you have to know what the current arcs are before jumping in blind. I could still make a case for it being enjoyable nonetheless, but it would be a hard case to make. Adam appears briefly and is the only person to realise that Jonathan is a fraud. It's smart that they did that. It shows the level of intelligence that the gang are up against. But he gets one scene, and still no backstory is given. Yes, I'm going to keep bringing this up where it was entirely possible to implement one. I like this episode, I really do. Now, have you ever heard of the legendary tale of the orgasm wall? Why does this episode exist? What is even going on here? I'm going to try my best to sum this up, but it's still not going to make very much sense. Buffy and Riley, now having made up, partake in sexual activities that somehow awaken the spirits of children during a house party. Children who used to live in the frat house before it was a frat house, when it was a children's home. These children were abused by the caretaker for being dirty, as she puts it, which basically means anything sexual. This causes an orgasm wall to appear, which when touched makes you feel like you're orgasming. How classy. People in the house start to act weirdly, including a girl that Xander likes who hacks all her hair off. Oh, that also reminds me. Anya believes that her and Xander are breaking up because, unlike Buffy and Riley, they haven't been having sex every night. Xander tries to tell Anya that just because they don't do it every night doesn't mean that he's not still into her, resulting in Xander's job as an ice cream man not lasting very long.
Right here. Hot, sweaty, big sex.
Basically, Buffy and Riley's sexual energies are being used by the spirits, and that's why there's fucking branches in the house. That part I'm still not clear on. Is that an Adam and Eve reference? I don't know. Is it life? Once they're drained of all their energy, they'll die, so Anya and Xander go into the house while Willow, Tara and Giles perform a spell to cast the spirits out of the house temporarily, and they save Buffy and Riley, who literally haven't noticed anything wrong. This is stupid. Come on, why did they do this? They could have given Adam a backstory, but for some reason, someone in the writing team insisted that they do an episode with a fucking orgasm wall. It's funny. It's very funny, but I would take a comprehensive plot with a good storyline over a slightly amusing, ridiculous and unfitting plotline. The show outgrew these sorts of stories in the second half of the third season. Gingerbread was a monumental episode because it was dumb, but it was the last time they did something like that. The entire second half of season 3 was spent character building and developing a solid storyline that people could get behind, hence why it's my favourite season. Here, we're in the second half of the season, with our main villain only being introduced 4 episodes ago, and they're doing shit like this. Had this been at the start of the season, I would be more forgiving, but that's why this episode and Be or Bad aren't liked. They don't fit with the new image the show was developing. This is just one big backstep after another. I don't hate this episode, I just hate where it is in the show. There's no narrative flow to speak of aside from 2-part stories. Nothing happens for like 3 episodes, and then something does, which leads to nothing happening again for another couple episodes. Tracy Forbes earns her spot of worst Buffy writer, not for being a bad writer, but because the showrunners were clearly at a complete loss and just shoved her jarring episodes into the season anywhere they could think of. I feel sorry for her because she wasn't part of the writing team for any other seasons, and I see potential comedy-wise, but not enough in other departments. Oh, hi Oz. Yep, Oz returns in the final episode of the Willow Oz trilogy and wants to speak to Willow about starting their relationship back up again. Oz has been all over the world on a spiritual journey, training to keep the wolf inside of him rather than outside. This is showcased when he takes Willow outside to the full moon while he's still very much Oz. The problem is, Tara, as Willow finally admits to Buffy that she's gay and is in a relationship with Tara. Meanwhile, Buffy and Riley have another falling out over Riley making comments about Oz after finding out that he's a werewolf. See, Riley thinks demons equal bad. People like Oz and Angel prove that sum doesn't always add up, and Buffy argues that. Willow goes to Tara, who assumes that Willow's going to leave her.
Do what makes you happy.
After that piece of not very good acting, Willow lets Tara know that she wants to be with her and not Oz. Unlucky for Tara, she runs into Oz later on and he smells Willow all over her, causing him to get so mad he becomes the werewolf. I think you should get your money back for the plane tickets, Oz. Whatever the hell you've been doing for the past few months hasn't worked very well. He's captured by the Initiative boys, and after doing a few tests, they conclude that the transformation is based on negative stimulation. They've turned Oz into the Incredible Hulk, basically. Riley goes against the Initiative after finding out that the demon they captured is Oz and attempts to rescue him, which doesn't work, and he gets suspended. I thought he was going to leave the military. Why is he still here? Anyway, Colonel McNamara lectures Riley on turning bad after Buffy showed up, and then tells him that he's lucky that he can still save his military career. Tara tells the gang about Oz, and they sneak into the Initiative with the help of Spike, who's actually now working with Adam, who promises Spike to get the chip out of his head if he assists in his plan. What is his plan, you ask? We don't know yet, but Adam wants Spike to help the gang into the Initiative. While they do so, Giles and Anya manage to turn the power off to the whole grid, except this is also Adam's doing and part of his plan. This plan is quite complex to not inform the viewer about, damn. Anyway, they save Oz, who then leaves again, and Riley is now officially no longer part of the military, staying under the radar at the burnt down Sunnydale High. Not the most stable building to be sleeping in, but okay. He makes up with Buffy as Willow and Tara continue their relationship with a newfound love for each other. This is a good episode. Shit is actually happening. Firstly, Oz returns to wrap up his character. I'm not a big fan of making him like the Hulk, but it doesn't really matter all that much considering he doesn't return after this, at least not in an actual sense. More on that later. I don't feel like his character was completely finished though. He still has more to work towards. He hasn't completed what he said he was going to do, and that's making the wolf under his control. I know there were plans to have him return in Angel's 6th season. Yeah, that's a long time to have him be away, but due to Angel being cancelled after its 5th season, this never happened. This is the end of the line for Oz, and I mean, okay, like the writer said, the show naturally progressed while Oz was away, that he didn't fit into what they were doing, whatever the fuck it is that they have been doing for the past 12 episodes. He's gone, and while I would have liked a better send-off for a main character, this isn't the worst exit the show has. His initial exit is definitely up there, but this one is fine. In other news, Adam does something, ladies and gentlemen. Round of applause. I hate that we don't learn exactly what his plan is because they want to save that for the 2-part finale, but it gives Spike some sort of purpose. Although I find it hard to believe that the gang, despite having interrogated Spike for months about the Initiative, learning that he knows absolutely nothing that they now don't already know, when he tells them that he can get them in the Initiative, they don't think twice about it. Tara has more of a prominent role, which is cool to see. I swear the chemistry between Willow and Tara gets better as the show goes on, but I'll be the first to admit there's a lot of awkwardness that doesn't always come off as pleasing to watch. Tara is a very socially awkward and self-conscious character. The reasons for this aren't revealed yet, but it's a bit jarring for now, placing her in the gang, who are all pretty talkable and confident. So a lot of the time she's just there, with Willow, and doesn't say much. Obviously this character is early on in her existence on the show, and I know the character we get, so I will praise the show for introducing a character who's got a lot to develop over the next few seasons. In conclusion, goodbye Oz, hello Tara, and Adam's actually got a plan. Hooray! Time for the 2-part finale, when there's 3 episodes left. Buffy returns from LA where she'd had a falling out with Angel after finding him harbouring Faith and falls asleep, sad and exhausted. The Initiative meanwhile have plans to deal with Buffy and bring Riley back into the military in doing so. Adam and Spike talk about Buffy and the gang, and Adam quips about how Spike has killed 2 Slayers before with little effort compared to the effort he's put into killing Buffy, and Spike has an epiphany about the gang. They're always there to pull her out of a close call, and Spike agrees to separate Buffy from the rest of the gang in exchange for getting the chip out of his head, and Adam agrees. Xander accidentally drops the truth about Angel and Buffy having sex to Riley, which Buffy had left out unbeknownst to the both of them, and Riley feels understandably hurt that Buffy didn't tell him. Later that day, Riley stops by to confront Buffy, and the two have a bit of a spat as Buffy won't tell Riley what happened in LA, and Angel being Buffy's ex and all, he begins to come to his own conclusions, swiftly leaving. Giles is busy playing his guitar when Spike drops by and begins his plan to manipulate the gang apart, beginning by telling Giles he knows about some discs inside the Initiative that contain some interesting information about the Initiative's plans. He asks Giles to ensure that he's not staked, ever, in return for the discs, and Giles accepts, which leads Spike to put down shouts into Giles' head about Buffy not listening to him anymore. Giles hasn't been Buffy's official watcher in over a year at this point, and Buffy never trains with him anymore. This starts Giles on the alcohol as Spike gets to work. He tells Xander that he overheard Buffy and Willow joking about him joining the army, making Xander feel unwanted. Buffy runs into Forrest while running through the forest in search of Adam, and the two find his secret cave where Forrest is killed by Adam, and Buffy flees, falling down a hill in the process. Spike fakes his return from the initiative, handing Willow the discs, also catching on that the relationship between her and Tara is close, and he tells her that he overheard Buffy and Xander making remarks about her going through a phase, which he masks as talking about being a witch and stuff, but you can see what Spike's doing at this point. Meanwhile, on a completely separate note, Riley hears a broadcast on the army's comms about a disturbance going on in town, and he heads to investigate, finding Angel, who, if you remember, told Wesley that he was going to head after Buffy at the end of the previous Angel episode. Angel acts extremely annoyed when he smells Buffy on Riley, and he figures out who he is from there pretty quickly. Riley thinks Angel's lost his soul, which Angel doesn't deny, and Riley now knows how that happens, so he starts to fight with Angel, which he loses. The two flee when army reinforcements show up and later reconvene at Buffy's dorm, where the two begin another dick measuring contest. Angel and Buffy head out to the hallway and make up, laughing it all off after all the commotion has settled down. Angel heads out, and Buffy tells Riley that Angel is still good and that she's sorry she didn't tell him the whole truth. Riley tells Buffy he loves her, which he does for the second time, although it's the first time that the real Buffy's hearing it, and she terribly segues into Forrest's death. Christ, that's a change of subject. Buffy later heads to Giles' place where Spike's meddling begins to take effect, and Willow, Xander and Buffy begin to argue about the others talking behind their backs, which starts a finger-pointing session, all while Giles is completely wasted in the background. Remember at the start of the season where there was that constant theme of Buffy being capable on her own as a Slayer? Well, here's where it reaches its climax. Yes, it's all finally starting to make sense.
And I'm not going to miss a moment of it.
Anya and Tara lock themselves in the bathroom and wait for the argument to end as Willow accuses Buffy of being weirded out by the fact that she's gay.
You can't handle Tara being my girlfriend.
No! It was bad before that, since you two went off to college and forgot about me. Just left me in the basement to Tara's your girlfriend?
Bloody hell.
It ends with Buffy cutting ties with the two, saying that it's no wonder there isn't a prophecy of a chosen one in her friends. Meanwhile at Adam's lair, Riley shows up out of nowhere, instructed to do so by Adam, and there's a chip in his chest that allows Adam to command him. Here, Adam finally lets the viewer in on his plan, which involves both himself and Riley becoming part of a super race of demons and humans, as was Maggie Walsh's original vision. What? That's it? A super race? A million Adams? What's with Spike then? Well, apparently Adam wants Buffy in the initiative alone so that she can kill a lot of the demons that he's going to set free in order to get as many body parts as he can to build his new demon-human race before he kills Buffy, just so that the casualties and body parts in the initiative are split. Spike demands for the chip to be removed, but then tells Adam that the bait to lure Buffy into the initiative was on the discs that Willow has, meaning that, once Willow decrypts them, she won't tell Buffy, and then she can't show up to even the casualties. Spike leaves to fix this hole, accidentally letting it slip to Buffy that he's the manipulator. See, he mentions that Buffy and Willow aren't on speaking terms after their argument, an argument which he wasn't present at. Buffy catches on quickly, but doesn't let on. The discs, meanwhile, decrypt themselves and the gang arrange a meet-up in which they all happily make up and agree to put their differences aside, if just for now, in order to stop Adam, whose plan Buffy begins to discern. Adam shows Riley to the secret lab which was built by Professor Walsh, and possibly hundreds of other workers, that nobody knows about. Here we find the reanimated corpses of Maggie and Dr. Angelman working for Adam to build the super race, as well as Forrest, the prototype of their design. Well, if you don't count Adam, that is. He's super strong, and suddenly moves like a video game character now, and Riley is strapped to a chair in preparation for his DNA to be given to the new hybrids. The gang make a plan to do an enjoining spell, to combine all of their abilities and strengths into one spirit that will possess Buffy temporarily so that she can actually kill Adam. They break into the initiative and share a hug after talking things through before quickly being found by the initiative. Spike is denied his chip being fixed by Adam due to the fact that Buffy's friends are with her. Colonel McNamara arrests the gang, however Adam begins his plan and sets the demons in the facility free. McNamara sends his squad out to fight them off, much to Buffy's objection, and after he does so the gang soon find out exactly where the entrance to the secret lab is. At 314 of course. They just have to cross the battlefield and the main lobby to get to it, which they do. Willow, Xander and Giles begin the spell as Buffy finds the strapped-in Riley and is attacked by Forrest and Maggie. She manages to fend Maggie off easily, but Forrest has given her some trouble. A shot of broken glass allows Riley to cut out the chip inside of him. Good thing he knows exactly where it is, I guess. He can feel it, and releases himself to kill the demon Forrest, saving Buffy. Buffy proceeds towards Adam and the two begin a fight as Buffy stalls him until the spell takes effect. She breaks up his Pulgara skewer to reveal a fucking Gatling gun which he fires at her. Just as she's about to be killed, the spell possesses her and she kills Adam, ripping his heart out and destroying it. Buffy and Riley head back to meet up with the gang and they plan their escape. During the battle, it's revealed to the viewer that while Colonel McNamara gets killed, Graham manages to survive and help the gang evacuate any remaining doctors and military. In the final scene, we see what looks like some top government officials at the Pentagon preparing to cover up the existence of the initiative and fill the facility in with concrete. As far as finales go, it's unconventional for the show. It doesn't actually feel like the climax until the final act of Primeval, but let's start with the Yoko factor first. Having Angel come back for this episode certainly helps it stand out in the season. Most of this episode is spent doing, well, nothing. Spike sets his manipulation in motion, at the end of the episode is where it pays off. This initial theme of this season is finally concluded. Although Buffy is a fully functional independent Slayer, she prefers and benefits from working with the gang. It's the way she would rather do things, as they're her family and she loves them. Plus there was that whole feeling alone thing in Fear itself. The scene in Jill's place is still one of my favourites. It never fails to make me laugh. This is how you structure the drama in the show, in my opinion. The reason they're falling out is ridiculous and has been assisted by Spike, which is why, as opposed to Dead Man's Party, it is portrayed with as much seriousness as the reason for the argument. I'd argue that this is the way that the show should write its drama and fights, but that wouldn't be too much fun. That's the whole reason this scene stands out. They keep trying to argue while things keep stopping them and distracting them. Xander has a level of self-consciousness, not about himself anymore, but about Anya. A part of him is scared that since the gang aren't big fans of Anya, that they'll begin to distance themselves from him. Willow feels this also, understandably, because she's just come out, and doesn't feel completely accepted with open arms by the gang. Of course, there's later changes in Primeval, but this is both Willow and Xander standing up for their separate lovers. That's right, Anya confesses her love to Xander in Primeval and promises to stand by him, even if his friends won't. In Primeval, speaking of it, is where Adam's plan is revealed, and the fact that he's thought so intricately about what should be a simple thing to do is a testament to his character. He's got a robot mind, he's going to find the flaws and try to fix them. Like I mentioned earlier, though, I don't think Adam was quite finished, and it ends up killing him, as he puts his trust in Spike, who, although initially planned to help Adam kill Buffy, accidentally ended up saving her. This is the start of Spike's long and drawn out transition into full-time Scooby, but I'm jumping the gun yet again. Bringing Maggie back briefly was a nice way to wrap up the storyline and make it feel like we've come full circle, but the fact that she's a walking corpse is ridiculous. I literally can't take this seriously, and I know it's a science fiction show with elements of horror and comedy, but the direction the show's been moving in has been towards more serious and educated storylines rather than just a monster of the week most of the time. This feels like they're playing this for laughs. In fact, the whole season does. Season 3 was a turning point. Season 4 was a backstep. The writers always expressed interest in going darker with the tone of the plot and characters, but the WB wanted Buffy to stay Buffy, and at the end of the day, that ended up being a much smarter choice than we give it credit for. It's a clash of visions between writers and other writers, and throw in the studio executives too. This feels like the end. The initiative is over, Adam is dead. The end, right? Alright, I'm going to keep this fairly compact, as this episode is structured unlike any other episode of the show. Basically, due to the spell that the gang performed to kill Adam, it channeled and awakened the spirit of the first Slayer, which attempts to kill the four of them in their dreams. The remainder of the episode is pretty much spent in each character's respective dreams. If I were to recap exactly what each character goes through, it would be entirely pointless, as it has no real effect on the story considering it's finished. No, the entire episode is full of foreshadowing and underlying aspects, which make it the masterpiece it is. I'm not kidding, most of this to the average viewer is gibberish, yet it's still brilliant to watch. This is no joke one of my favourite episodes, just because it's the most realistic portrayal of dreams I've ever seen done in visual media. It's also one of the funniest episodes of the show, literally making my sides hurt, even on my millionth rewatch. It experiments with odd camera angles and editing to create something entirely original. In the end, Buffy confronts the First Slayer, who basically tells her she'll always be alone. Buffy says that's ridiculous, and that causes the First Slayer to basically back off, and the four wake up. I literally can't explain this episode without going in depth on Season 5, which I don't really want to do, so unlike what most reviewers do, I'm going to look at this episode in the context of a first-time viewer. That being said, if you want a real in-depth look at all the foreshadowing and such, check out Passion of the Nerd's video on it as part of his Buffy Guide series, as he does a much better job than I could, although I do recommend watching Season 5 beforehand. Restless is such an unconventional way to end the season, almost like the rest of the season itself. It's the epilogue, basically, which the show has never done before and won't do again. I'm all for experimentation and pushing the envelope for what the show could achieve, as long as the right writer is behind it, and Joss Whedon is about as trustworthy as you can get. Writing-wise, anyway. The First Slayer is introduced, which was the thing I brought up that was foreshadowed in Beer Bad. Yep, the cave woman thing awakened some sort of awareness of the First Slayer, so Buffy drew it on the wall, or something similar anyway. Aside from that, Riley meets Joyce for the first time and then heads out to be honourably discharged from the military due to helping the survivors out of the initiative. The final appearances of Oz, Principal Snyder, and Olivia all take place in this episode, although this isn't canonical, as Oz is gone, Snyder is dead, and Olivia just sort of disappeared after Hush. I suppose people want me to at least mention the Cheeseman, whose meaning has been debated online for years, when in reality he doesn't mean anything. Joss Whedon wanted something in all the madness that existed solely to make the fans speculate, and speculate they did. Holy shit. Buffy's dream is obviously going to include more of the important stuff, considering she has prophetic dreams anyway, which we really haven't heard from in a while.
Be back before dawn.
That's all I have to say on this, and if you're disappointed, trust me, we'd be here for double the length of the Season 3 video if I went into every minor detail. All in all, I love this episode. I admire that they did something different and creative with their last episode here. Season 4 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a bit of a mess, as you can gather. There are fantastic moments that shine through, but due to its sudden creation, it feels thrown together at the last minute. I mentioned at the start of the video that I believe this to be one of the 2-season storylines that were created to increase the length of the show, which was originally envisioned as a 5-season long story, and I stand by it. They had the beginning, and they had the end. They knew a few things that they wanted to do, a few characters they wanted to bring in, and that was it. The writers hit a brick wall at the halfway point and somehow managed to climb over it and crawl to the finish line. Let's talk about Adam first, who I gave the writers a lot of criticism about, but he's a cool concept. He's funny and has good banter with Spike and the other vampires. I just don't get a big bad vibe out of him. This season was really shaken up by the sudden departures of Oz and Maggie, who were supposed to be in every episode, and have full story arcs that were never expanded upon. The show wishes to return to the way it was before the second half of Season 3 changed things. Sure, there were one-offs in Season 3, but they always tied into the main plotline in some way. But here, they do one-offs that's entire purpose is to be a one-off, and they aren't strong enough to hold up on their own. It wants to be taken seriously, but chooses to do the most ridiculous storylines to fill in the gaps along the way. Maggie would have been a cool villain, and I would have loved to have seen the original vision for Season 4, but I still don't think it would have been worth it. This story was just not good enough, which is the reason why it's not rated too high in many fans' lists. I'm happy that the show was extended and we get to see more of these characters, but I feel like this whole thing was mostly a waste of time. Aside from a few episodes, this season has a lackluster plot with an unsatisfying resolution, not because of the way the resolution was written, but because of the way the build-up was written. Giles doesn't have anything to do the entire time because he's become irrelevant to Buffy and her slaying, considering there's no contractual obligation to continue training on a recurring basis. That being said, the show fixes that, and the two begin training regularly following this season. He's just kinda lost. He's a playboy at the start of the season, and lonely by the end. That's not progression, that's degression. Xander also feels lost, but that feels more on purpose. He's just left high school with no college to go to, so he jumps from crap job to crap job, trying to earn a living while dealing with his hell of a family. He finds solace in Anya, and the two begin to love one another, providing Xander a path to continue on next season. Willow discovers Tara after being abandoned by Oz, and the real identity inside herself. I was initially puzzled by Willow's sudden gayness, but it makes sense to me now. Although I'm speaking as someone who isn't gay and has never had to deal with the way it makes you feel, I can see why we never had it hinted at before. It's the person she was beneath it all, and she doesn't find it out until she meets Tara, who shares that bond with her. I like Willow and Tara. Their chemistry together is a shaky one at first, which might be because Willow's new to this. It's something she's not sure how to proceed with at first until she comes out in New Moon Rising. Their chemistry gets better, and it ends up progressing into one of the best romances the show ever has. Spike introduces himself as an antagonist early on, making you think he's going to be the big bad yet again, but soon finds himself chipped and part of the gang sometimes. Like I mentioned earlier, he does become more involved, although you know, and he knows, that he'll never be fully accepted so long as he's a vampire. It gives him some more development to do, and hopefully more purpose in things. Riley is the new face, who's the military's top man until he meets Buffy and begins to steer off course, becoming the liberated and in-love man we see in the last episode. The problem is, where else can they go with this character? He feels finished to me, so I guess we'll have to wait and see what they come up with next season. He's already free of the experience he went through, so time to invent some new ones, methinks. Buffy is beginning to find out more about herself and her Slayer heritage. She's now happy, and with Riley, moved on from Angel completely. There's always going to be feelings there, but the possibility of a relationship and the two butting heads is out of the window. They partied on good terms at the end of the Yoko factor. Having the show move on without Angel was apparently easy, according to the writers. They didn't have to worry about what they wanted to do with him and let him crack on over his own program. They say it was easier, but I beg to differ. I've never been more frustrated with the show than with Season 4. It just had too many ambitions that it never gave itself time to develop. To talk about the positives, my favourite episode this season has to be Hush. It's a prime example of what the show can achieve when it has a vision, and is a superb watch from start to finish. It works as a one-off, and a link in the season. My least favourite episode is Wild at Heart. Oz's botched exit was executed horrendously. I mentioned during Dead Man's Party back in Season 3 that having characters act out of character to further the plot grinds my fucking gears something fierce, as there's no reason for it to happen, but yet it does. I'm glad they gave Oz a better conclusion in New Moon Rising, but the whole Veruca thing, and then not telling anyone just so that the two can end in one episode, is so anticlimactic for the love that these two supposedly share. Willow gets over him while he's away, so much that she prefers the opposite sex, so it almost negates the past 2 seasons of relationship building. The show needed to get back on track ASAP, and so the originally envisioned 4th season became the outline for Season 5, and the show did just that. It got back on track. Thanks for watching, guys, and if you haven't already, check out my Angel video once it's up and active. The reason this took so long was because I've recently started studying at college, so more of my time was required for that than this. But I persevered nonetheless to provide you all with something to watch while I prepare the next 2 videos. See you when I see you.